Our next Shop Talk guest has helped literally hundreds of designers achieve their commercial and creative ambitions in her role as Head of Business Development. I am delighted to welcome Ellen O'Hara from Cockpit Arts.
And good morning, everyone. So I'm Ellen, and I'm going to just try and rest this on here. Okay, I'm going to be talking for about 15-20 minutes about the rise of the designer maker from our perspective at Cockpit. So I'm not going to say too much about consumer trends, more about how we're witnessing makers respond to these shifts, how we're helping them, and what that means to you as retailers and makers. Before I start, would you mind just giving me a show of hands so I know how many of you guys are retailers or buyers? A few. And how many are makers? Just as many? And how many are something else? Okay. We also have some of the Cockpit team with us, so Madeline, Marissa, and Imogen. So when I finish talking, there'll be a chance to come and have a chat to us and ask us some questions, so do take advantage of that. Just to set the scene and just say a little bit about Cockpit for those of you who don't know. We are a social enterprise, an award-winning social enterprise. We're a creative incubator for designer makers. So that means we provide studio space as well as business development support, PR marketing support, all designed to support makers achieve creative and commercial success. And as our mission states here, we're looking to promote talented makers from all backgrounds through all stages of their careers. We span many disciplines, from jewellery to ceramics, textiles, wood, furniture, even some fashion accessories and garments. So it's a really diverse community. And overall, we're hoping to make a dint on the kind of craft economy and support a more viable cultural contribution by makers. And we're really pleased to say that it's working. So before I talk about what we do and what the makers are doing, I just wanted to share this statistic with you. So we track the growth of all of the makers that we work with in our studios, and we've been doing this since 2006. So despite the economic downturn, through the credit crunch and kind of out of the other side, we've seen makers continuing to achieve success financially as well as creatively, and as the stat here shows, sales have continued to increase by around 20% year on year, and that's above inflation. So it's a really exciting stat to share with you, and something that we're really proud to be a part of. And although I'm not going to talk too much about consumer trends, obviously, shifts in attitudes around a backlash against the mass-produced, a reappraisal towards more traditional values, about local production, about the handcrafted. These are all things that makers have been kind of poised to respond to, as well as really key themes like provenance, as consumers become more concerned about where the products on our shelves are coming from, how they arrived there, the supply chains, how materials are sourced. Makers on the whole have really transparent supply chains. So again, in terms of their own story and for you as retailers, it's another way that you can help respond to some of these consumer shifts. And what we're seeing also alongside that is kind of a move towards a kind of new luxury, if you like. So, as kind of luxury goods have become more democratized and the shift towards mass production in that end of the market, the kind of artisanal end of luxury has begun to disappear, yet makers are kind of stepping back into the spotlight, if you like, and aligning themselves with luxury brands and as luxury brands in their own right, and bringing this kind of artisanal production back to the heart of British luxury. So there's lots of changes happening in the market. And as I said, what I'm going to talk about really is what we're witnessing in terms of how makers are responding to that, and what it means to you as retailers. So I only have a few slides. Perhaps most obviously, it's the combination of being a designer and a maker which make designer makers so special. So we're not just offering very high levels of technical skill and handcrafted products that are durable, that have longevity, but they are also design-led. And I think for you as retailers, this is really critical. So makers on the whole, and you'll see this out in the show today, in launch pads and in the contemporary home areas, these makers they're creating markets. They're not just following trends, but they're creating them. They're creating new meaning in the work that they make. And they're able to tell really compelling stories about themselves as makers, about the production process they use, their own materials knowledge, and all of these are really kind of powerful brand story and kind of selling tools, both for you as individual makers, but obviously as retailers too. And I think, for us at Cockpit, we spend a good deal of time with the makers we work with, helping them to really understand where they add value. And we do know through the research that we do that those makers who are most successful are those that are continuously innovating in terms of design development. They're the makers who are always investing time, money and energy in their own creative practice and their technical skill and in their design innovations. And this is what really gives them the cutting edge, I think, in the market at the moment. And the maker you see here is a lady called Maya. She's a silversmith and jeweller. She's not showing at Pulse, but you'll be able to come and see her at our open studios. Makers, as you might expect, because of the nature of the work they produce, with it being handmade, often in-house, the majority of the makers we work with are sole traders, if not micro businesses, so less than 10 employees, with all of their production in-house on the whole. This can make it very difficult for them to work with retailers on a wholesale basis. The economies of scale they're able to achieve are not always as great as they need to be to get the kind of order volumes, the lead times, the price points that lots of retailers are commanding. But there are other ways that they can tackle this. And again, we've seen a big increase in the diversification of makers' practice in order that they can work with retailers in different ways. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. Beginning with commissions and collaborations. Certainly through the economic downturn, we have worked with makers to look at how they can diversify their practice. So again, those that are really thriving, they're not just innovating in terms of their product development, but they're diversifying in terms of their markets. And they're looking at how they can not only sell to the contemporary craft audience and sell direct at craft fairs, but they're looking at how they can start breaking into the high-end luxury arenas, luxury goods, high-end fashion, high-end interiors, working with different agents and specifiers in new and really exciting ways. And again, because they're small, they're really agile. They can be really flexible, they can adapt, they can work in different ways, they can make decisions really quickly, and they're able to respond to commissioners and specifiers and briefs with great success. And what we're witnessing at the moment is a kind of particular shift towards commissions and collaborations in the hospitality arena. So makers working with hoteliers, with restaurants, producing bespoke dinner service sets, for instance, or interior lines, even if it's the kind of foyer type decor. As well as collaborations with larger brands who are wanting to bring a kind of essence of the artisan into their kind of core lines. So this includes department stores right through to some of the smaller independent stores. We ourselves can help broker that process, and over the last probably 4 to 5 years, we've had a really strong relationship with the South Bank Centre retail team. whose remit is not only to produce work that's really cutting edge and a great offer for their artistic program visitors, but their stores are very design-led, so they turn over their stock really quickly. About 90% of their stock is turned over every quarter, so they're always looking for new and exciting designers and makers to work with. And a recent project for us, which ended towards the end of last year, was a project called Created at Cockpit, which was a 12-month rotating concession whereby makers from Cockpit entered a competition in response to a brief to produce work that was particularly inspired by the South Bank Centre. So their artistic programme, the architecture, the site itself, and the work went into store on a rotated basis. And it was a great project for us because it helped to commemorate our 25th birthday, and it was also in response to the South Bank Centre's 60th anniversary. And I think projects like that are a really great way to illustrate, again, the kind of flexibility of makers and how they can kind of bring a campaign to life, whether it's a PR campaign or a particular theme or priority trend that you're working with at any one time. We're also seeing lots of activity in the heritage sector. So makers working with retailers in heritage shops, design museums, National Trust type houses and gardens. And again, there's a real drive from these retailers to look at how they can revamp their merchandising strategy, how they can offer their customers something really unique. So not just a souvenir, but a souvenir of the whole story of the experience of the visit. And again, makers are really well placed to work with those types of retailers to help bring museum collections to life, or the history or the story behind a particular site. And again, if you want to see examples of that, we were involved in an Arts Council project probably about 4 or 5 years ago now called Museum Maker. Some of you may be familiar with this. And it was a really exciting programme bringing together museums and makers to develop work, to develop collections, to develop educational programmes that help really bring the archives and the collections of those museums to life and bring a kind of audience development aspect to those shops and to those programmes. We're also seeing an increasing number of collaborations between makers and larger brands, particularly in the kind of high-end and luxury goods arena. For us at Cockpit, this started a few years ago working with some of the larger department stores, providing tours of the building so they could then start to understand how makers operate, what they're capable of, what their capacity might be. And so we could start to understand what the bigger stores are looking for. And the outcome of those kind of initial conversations, some were collaborative product lines, others were installation projects, shop window displays, other in-store activities, all designed to give you that point of sale and to really attract those customers in a different way. And again, I think this really helps to illustrate the flexibility and the versatility of makers. And we're certainly always looking at ways to help them develop business models that don't just rely on the sale of a final product. If they have another transferable skill, whether it's a service or another aspect of their practice that they want to develop, through an installation, for instance, we feel that's a really exciting way for them to develop their practice, for the store to get a really eye-catching, unique offer. And so in that respect, it's a real win-win. The third area, and it's a kind of an extension of this really, is makers working in a more consultative kind of licensor capacity. And again, particularly through the kind of credit crunch years, even though I know we're only just still coming out of it, but that particularly prompted lots of questions around how makers can diversify their practice, how they can de-risk, how they can look at commercialising their transferable skills in different ways. And we've started to see quite a sharp increase in makers licensing designs to both manufacturers and retailers, small independent retailers up to department stores, as a means of accessing that market. So the point I made before about some makers not really being capable of the volume production or the lead or the short enough lead times or the low enough price points to provide a wholesale offer, a viable wholesale offer. One way that they're combating that is by working with stores in a licensing capacity. And again, we're seeing that's not only increasing, but the percentage of sales income that makers at Cockpit are sharing with us, we're seeing an increasing average in terms of licensing income. And that's really interesting because it's not just the kind of surface pattern designers who are perhaps lending their surface pattern ideas to a department store. It's across the board, so it's across ceramics, glass, furniture. And again, this comes back to some of the collaborative activity we're seeing, where makers are reconnecting with manufacturing base in the UK and collaborating with manufacturers up in Stoke, for instance, for ceramics, or small CMT units down in South London, in order that they can respond to some of the interest from the bigger stores. And what I would say is, being in an environment like Cockpit is particularly beneficial because we're able to provide that back-end support to makers to handhold them through this process. So as a retailer working with a maker in this capacity for the first time, there are of course risks, but what I would say is that there's an added benefit to you for sourcing your talent from somewhere like Cockpit, because you can be reassured that they're receiving the kind of back-end support they need to deliver. On the consulting side, I would say that makers not only add value in terms of obviously the finished product, but their tacit knowledge in terms of their material knowledge and what it's capable of, their understanding of form and function and design means that they're really well placed to be kind of trend forecasters themselves. And there are a handful of makers who have that activity as part of their portfolio. And again, what we're seeing is an increasing number of makers working with in-house design teams as consultants, design consultants, working with big brands on prototyping, helping them to problem solve production and understand material capacity, as well as just offering straightforward design consultancy to both in-house teams and licensing teams. And again, this is really exciting for us to see. And again, it's a win-win for the makers. It means they're able to really stretch their own creative aspirations. They're able to de-risk their practice financially. And for you as retailers, you're getting something really unique and that's well thought through, that's really innovative and really pushing the boundaries of your own product lines. And I think that covers all of my main points, actually. It's quite short and sweet. But what I would say, if you want to see where all of the magic happens, we do open to the public twice a year, so in June and in December. And we have an Open Studios event coming up next month. The dates are here, and there's a flyer on your chair. And that's really an opportunity for you as retailers to meet makers, to have conversations about kind of commissioning opportunities, what they're capable of, to understand their story better and to see where you might be able to make brand alliances, where the good fits are. And similarly, to meet the team and to talk about how we might be able to help facilitate that process. I think I'm going to bring it to a close there. So if you want to come and have a talk to me, or Madeline, Marissa or Imogen, who are here with me today, then please do. Otherwise, come along to the Open Studios. I was hoping to show a short film today to help bring that to life,